Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
Coming up today, you'll meet Father George Clements of Chicago, Illinois. He's an adoptive parent and co-founder of a national black adoption program. We'll also tell you what state officials here in Louisiana are doing to find permanent homes for some black children now in foster care. I'm Rob Hinton. That story and more today on Folks.
Everybody's just folks. Just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks who live, folks got to give, folks got to care, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of us, who touches us all? To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks. Just plain old folks. Just plain old folks. Everybody just folks. Everybody just folks. Just plain old folks. Just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. First up today, we'll be telling you about a man who has turned a dream into reality, not only for himself, but for countless others. That man is Father George Clements of Chicago, Illinois. Father Clements is the co-founder of the One Church, One Child program, a black adoption program. Now, Father Clements saw the black church as the best place to recruit black adoptive families. But turning his dream into reality became somewhat frustrating. What did he do? Well, here's Gordon Johnson, director of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, to tell us.
We told them we had some problems. We had 700 black children who needed homes, and that we were trying to get these children placed. We had made changes in our agency regulations. You didn't have to be married. You could be single. You didn't have to live in a house, and you could have a modest income, and so forth and so on. We went through that. We also said we're bringing on black staff because in Department of Children and Family Services, the hierarchy is there. The seniority is there. Adoption is the elite group. And when you move into those areas of child welfare, child abuse and neglect, which we deal with every day, is a very difficult area, but awful hard to be as staff. The burnout is high. But in adoptions, it's a little different. It's nice. You get some satisfaction of placing and making families happy. We made changes. We brought some black staff in, and we made those staff black and white get out on weekends. We told Father, we're ready to do all of this. He says, I want to help. He said, I'm going to my parish. I'm just going to give a little background of what he said. I'm going to my parishioners. I'm going to talk to them because I think we can launch this. And he says, I think I'm going to come up with a name. I think One Church, One Child. And he says, that seems to have a ring. He says, I'll help you. We didn't know what was going to happen. 2 weeks later, he said, I talked to my parishioners, and basically bottom line was they turned me off. He was angry. I never seen him so angry. I said, well, what's this man going to do? So I didn't hear anything, and then about 2 days later, he says, Gordon, I want to tell you first before anybody else hears about it. I said, yes, Father, I figured, that he's not going to have anything to do with the program. He said, I'm going to adopt a child. And if he doesn't remember, I will remember. There was a pause, a long pause at the end of the phone from me. I said, a black priest going to adopt a black child? Who knows the Pope? What's going to happen here? So what happened was, he stirred up not only the nation, but Chicago was burning. I mean, they were, his bosses and his peers were just rocking and reeling, laughing and carrying on, and not only that, very serious about what was going on. And of course, we followed through with it. And we had to test too, because the big test for this department was, can we produce a child for him in a short period of time? Because Father's not going to wait for 6 months, a year, and 2 years now. He's going to test the system himself. I knew what was happening. And we did. Gary Morgan, who's my associate deputy who was in charge of handling that case. And I think within 30 days, we had Joey in Father's care.
If you really want to talk about one church, one family, go back to 1619, when we first arrived on these shores, much against our will. And when we arrived here, it was into an institution that is one of the most barbaric the world has ever known. One of the most incredibly, horribly, wretched, filthy, rotten practices that human beings have ever gotten involved in. And that is, of course, slavery. And when we got involved in this, we were a people that really were at sea. We had nothing and nobody and nowhere to turn. And there was one institution that came to our rescue during those days of slavery. And that one institution is what you are inside at this moment, and that is God's black church. It was the black church that enabled us to survive. And it was the black church that brought us through a period that a lot of us try to gloss over. We don't like to even think about it. You know, they have a thing here in America that they call Black History Month in February. The very fact that we have it indicates that there is a lacuna in the historical archives of this nation, because they just tried to just kind of pretend that black folks didn't even exist up until fairly recently. But now we're trying to make up for it through what is called Black History Month. Well, one of the things that we're going to have to come to grips with when we're talking about black history is that period right after slavery, right after 1863, when black folks were thrown upon this nation without any real skills, without very, very little expertise, with very, very little to offer this nation. Millions. And the thought occurred to quite a few people in command in this nation that we need to do the same thing to black folks that had happened to the American Indians, and that is extermination. These people were now expendable. Let's get rid of them. And it was the black church that came to our rescue and said, no, no, you dare not touch them, because they are baptized Christians, baptized. And if you do something to them, you are guilty of murder. It's not like some heathen Indians. That's murder. And it was the black church, through both black churchmen and some white churchmen, notably Quakers, who came and brought us through that period, on through the Reconstruction, on into those world wars that we had, on into that Great Depression. When you talk about poverty, now I don't see too many people in my vintage in this room, but anybody who is around my time, you know what that depression was. Now that was some shown-up poverty. And the only institution that we had to turn to was the black church. The black church. And then we brought that on into this civil rights era. And where again did we go? I was one who was fortunate enough to be at Brown's Chapel down in Selma, Alabama a few years ago. And once again, it was the black church back there in Montgomery and all the way through the South and on into the much greater, harder, more difficult struggle in that north. You know, they say the real problem is up north, not down south. We're the ones that are the hypocrites down through our history. And it was that black church, once again. Matter of fact, who had the audacity to run for the presidency of the United States right in our own time, other than a black churchman, Reverend Jesse Jackson? So it's the black church that I want to really talk about this afternoon and tell you that the only way we are ever going to be able to solve this problem of homeless children is by the utilization of the black church.
Father Clements and Gordon Johnson are the founders of the One Church, One Child program, a program with proven success. It has been so successful that state officials here have initiated the One Church, One Family program, very similar to the black adoption program in Illinois. According to Dr. Sandra Robinson, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Resources, Louisiana ranks 5th in the nation with children in foster care, approximately 6,000. And many of these children are black.
Right now, that about 47% of our minority children are usually between 6 and 12 years of age. And of course, that creates a difficulty because many parents are looking for babies. We also have a lack of parents available for minority kids, and of course, this is the reason for this group. When we looked at the statistics in terms of white parents and white children, we find on average that there are 3 couples for every white child that may need adoption, whereas there are very few black couples available for black children.
Why are there so many homeless black children? Well, Father Clements has an idea why.
The reason is quite simple, because the black church has not been brought into the picture. Black people really were never aware of the dimensions of this problem until fairly recently. And now that they have become aware, now that Louisiana is number 4, we started with Illinois, then we got Missouri, then we got Kansas, and now we got Louisiana. Now that Louisiana is also involved, you're going to see a rapid decrease in the number of children who have only temporary homes. They're going to be getting permanent homes.
As mentioned earlier, Father Clements is co-founder of the One Church, One Child concept. Only here in Louisiana, the program is called One Church, One Family. The program utilizes the clergy as recruiters of black families who are willing to adopt.
The clergy has the leading role, really, because the people who we are trying to persuade to take in homeless children are people who are really convinced that the clergy is trustworthy. And so they are willing to listen to what the clergy have to say. See, I think we have to just accept for a given fact the reason that we have had such little cooperation between the general public and government bureaucrats is because they don't trust them. And they don't really feel that they're going to get a good deal. Most people don't, many people don't. They feel like there's reams and reams of red tape they'll have to go through, and so they just sort of throw up their hands and say, well, what's the point? But when you get the clergy involved, that's a different dynamic altogether.
What approach will the clergy use as far as approaching prospective members of their congregation?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is what Louisiana has done, and that is you have to get leading clergy on your board. These are people who know other clergy intimately. As with most professional groups, clergy speak to clergy, just like lawyers talk to lawyers or doctors to doctors. And what we want to do is get into the churches in the black community with a very brief program of perhaps an adoptive couple, a movie, expert in the field of adoption, and have them make a presentation, and then we're hopeful that at least one family in that church will actually adopt a child. Of course, as the experience of Illinois shows, usually more than one does. But in order to do that, you have to get the minister's cooperation, and that's why the ministerial role is so important, because the minister on the board will tell us about other churches where he knows we will get a warm reception, and that's really what's key.
Now, the program is run by a board known as the Louisiana Council for the Adoption of Minority Youth.
The Louisiana Council for the Adoption of Minority Youth is a group of interdenominational ministers from across the state with the sole purpose of acting as a liaison between prospective parents of children with special needs and adoptive agencies throughout the state. The idea of such a council was brought forth through the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Resources. After reviewing such a program in Illinois, Dr. Sandra Robinson shared with the governor her conception of a statewide thrust of minority adoption under the leadership of a ministerial council. The governor readily sanctioned the idea. and the task of soliciting different ministers from all denominations was undertaken. Several meetings were held in the state as well as other states to gather insight into the effectiveness of such a council. At the meeting, goals were established and the board was organized. The board will eventually consist of 15 members from different regions across the state. Members of the original task force met in Chicago with Father Clements, the organizer of this program for insight and guidance. Once the groundwork had been laid, today's meeting was set up to officially announce the affiliation of the church with adoptive agencies for minority youth.
And according to Gordon Johnson, director of the Department of Children and Family Services in Illinois, the media plays a key role.
Well, the media in many other states and many other cities will have programs they call like Wednesday's Child or Child Who Needs Placement, and to highlight that need for the placement of that child at a specific time, and they'll go out and they will help the community to realize that there are children who need placement, there are children who need homes. There's no way that in Illinois that we would have been so successful if we didn't have the media who were so committed to helping us to find homes for those children. And what they did was they would have press conferences like this, but they also would say, we're going to commit a day, a month, or a week to highlight a special child on our specific newscast, and we're going to call it such and such. And so one of the reporters, commits his time, and the station commits their time to highlighting the need for placement of children.
Tell us about some of the reaction you have gotten from the adoptive parents about this program in Illinois.
Well, initially, they were surprised that we had changed. Illinois had changed many of its regulations, and made sure we had staff. We did a lot of things in Illinois that many other states have not done. And what had happened as a result of our change, particularly the black parents said, look, I see that this state is trying to make changes, and I see that they're going to place a child in my home. It's not going to take 6 years or 2 years. It's going to take 30 days or 6 months. And we have been very successful in placing children within 30 days to 6 months, which is a very surprise factor in the black community.
We have gotten a very, very strong response from Illinois to the extent that we had 703 children black children waiting for adoption when we started the program. Today we have 40. So, there's just been a tremendous response.
Our next segment features a lady with a lot of grace and style. Her name is Lula Elzy, and she's a dancer. This is one of the modern dance classes at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. It is taught by 28-year-old Lula Elzy, a native New Orleanian. Dancing is Lula's life, so she says.
Life, dancing is also the thing of youth. Like, people go through a whole trend of trying to stay young all their lives, but if you're a dancer, you found that fountain of youth because it keeps you alive, and then you work with children and you're on the stage and you have to have all of that energy.
But it hasn't always been that way. You see, she developed her interest in dancing at age 17.
Very, very late. I have always gone to the ballets, and especially the people that were doing Holiday on Ice, seeing all the skaters, and look at pictures in the book and then try to figure out how they were doing the steps. And I was basically a shy person, so when I started to dance, everybody was surprised, but that would pique my interest because I love to see the body moves across the stage and all the energy. And I say, yeah, that's what I want to do now.
Lula also attended the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, but after graduating from high school, her original plan was to become a history teacher.
Well, I was going to Southern University in New Orleans, and I was working, and I was also dancing with an African company. And one day I was in class, and through a history test, I said, well, you must be crazy or something. You can't do it all, so you have to make a decision. And as I worked, I saved a lot of money, and I decided to go to New York. And once I got there and saw all the people that were dancing, and they were waiting on tables and all that because they loved the art so much, you know, it just kept me going and going. And I said, well, if they could do it, I could do it.
But dancing became an obsession. And in the summer of 1978, it took her to New York, where she danced in Alvin Ailey's summer program.
It was wonderful at the Alvin Ailey School because there had so many people there who really wanted to dance, you know. And you go into the building and everybody was always stretching and the music was going and you hear the teachers screaming and shouting and everybody was sweating. You know, you say, wow, this is going to be like, I'm going to give this a try. And it was like basically 50 to 60 people in class, so you had to do everything and do it very well so the teacher noticed you and noticed that you were interested in being a dancer and that you were there to work, and then you had to go every day. You know, you don't want to go one day and then skip 5 days. They don't remember who you are. But that was a wonderful school to start at because we had to do ballet, the jazz, the modern, and also Dunham, which is close to the African style of dance, so it was great.
4 years later, Lula danced her way to Russia.
That was interesting. It was wonderful because all the people who were there who were dancers, you know. That were going to be their whole life, and you could tell, you know, they were very serious. And then when you have 80 people and they're all good, you know, it gives you something else to strive for. So that was an interesting trip. I enjoyed that.
In addition to teaching, Lula is the director and choreographer of her own dance troupe called the Performing Company.
Ah, the Performing Company. I was dancing with like 3 other groups, and other people were doing the choreography, and I just loved to dance. I just wanted to dance, so it really didn't matter. But as time went on and people were moving in and out of town, having different opinions what things should be, and so I decided that I should form my own little group. At first I thought about no more than about 5 or 6 people, and then people started to get interested, and so it grew to about 10. And some of the people that I've danced with before in the past joined the group, and then I got stuck with doing the choreography, so that was something new.
But back in the classroom, she puts her students through the paces.
To enjoy it, whether the students want to be dancers or not, you know, whether they just want to sit in the audience and appreciate dancing or appreciate any form of art. If they're doing it themselves, then they understand the hard work that went into it and all of the aches and pains that it took just to do one step. So every time I teach and so I tell them to enjoy, to smile, to tell themselves they love what they're doing, although their body really hurts, you know, they'll get over it, you know, and the sweat, everything is worth it.
Even though Lula started dancing at a late age, she feels she has many good performing years ahead of her.
An advantage to a certain extent, because I feel now that I could go on till about 45. Some dancers start really, really early, and then they have to stop about 30. But I think I could dance right through those years. And the disadvantage is that if I would have started younger, I think I would have more technique. And that's the basics, because when the talent goes, the technique lasts. So in the process of being a dancer and a teacher, I still have to take more classes and a great deal of basic classes so I could really get into all of the technique of dancing.
And if you're wondering between teaching and performing which she finds more rewarding, well, Lula says...
Performing. I say performing because I like the feeling and the growth of it, and I love to see the people in the audience react, and to say that they wouldn't come backstage and say, I've enjoyed it, and how did you do it, and how long did it take you to do it? And, you know, I like teaching also because I understand the problems of some students starting very late, you know, being a dancer, so. But the performing is, yeah, that's it.
We close today's show with a bit of jazz. Jazz featuring clarinetist Alvin Batiste and a few of the musicians in his Jazz Institute at Southern University. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with another edition of Folks, and we hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.